the Jesus way.
Oh, the Jesus way
Is the way of peace.
is the way of peace.
Oh, the Jesus way.
Oh, the Jesus way
Is the way of peace.
is the way of peace.
Oh, the Jesus way is the way of peace. When he is king, all wars will cease. May his peace begin with me.
In this country, bicyclists have to be quite wary and careful out there on the roads. There are a lot of bicyclists who have had run-ins with cars because of the heavy traffic. Often, that's what gets the news. This program features a Brethren bicyclist, a Church of the Brethren member who made a trip on his bicycle that most of us would never dream of. It was a 4,000-mile trip beginning in London, England, and traveling across France and Spain to northern Africa, ending up in St. Louis, Senegal. Hello, I'm Brent Carlson, and welcome to Brethren Voices. Later on, we'll have another bicycle-related story that is being promoted and dedicated to the memory of Paul Ziegler, a Church of the Brethren college student who died in a bicycle automobile accident in McPherson, Kansas, September 2012. The campaign, 3,000 Miles for Peace, will help Peace on Earth raise funds for violence prevention efforts. But first, we're glad to have Steve Kayford with us to tell us about a quite amazing journey. Steve Kayford, welcome to Brethren Voices.
Thank you.
It's
It's a pleasure to be here.
It's nice to have you.
Cool.
Steve, few people ever dream of making such a trip. If they did, it would probably have been a bad dream. So how did this happen?
It's something I wanted to do for a long time.
So it's been in the planning stage for...
Well, it's been in the back of my mind since I was, 12 or 13 or something.
Really?
Yeah. I grew up in Nigeria. My parents were missionaries there. And one year when I was maybe 13 or so, a couple British cyclists appeared who had ridden down. And ever since then, it stuck in my head that I wanted to try that.
You wanted to do that?
Yeah.
So did they come basically the same route you did?
Similar route. I'm not sure of the details,
Okay.
but yeah. Yep.
So you've been planning this or dreaming about this for many years.
Yeah, several.
So how long ago did you really start to think this is a reality that I can make come true?
Probably about 2 years ago, I started to think that this was probably a good time to do it. Just everything was kind of lining up right.
And the whole trip, from the time you left Portland, Oregon to the time you came back, how long did that take?
It was a little over 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah. That about 4 months, a little under 4 months was actually cycling.
Can you tell us about the route? How did you pick the route, and how did you decide? Because
Right.
I mean, it's all open. I mean, how are you going to get from here to there? I mean, how did you decide?
Well, I wanted to do a route across the Sahara. That was my big goal. And if you're going to do that, there's really only two ways you can go. You can go down the west coast, or you can go down from Egypt to through Sudan to Ethiopia. And I knew some people in Senegal. I'd been there before, and I had friends in London, England, and I thought that would be the way to go. How
did you get to have friends in Senegal? Because you were in Nigeria.
Yeah, I grew up in Nigeria. Yeah, and when I was in college at the University of La Verne, I did a January term. They had a trip to Senegal, so that was the first time I went there. And then back in '99, I did another trip to Senegal, and so I have friends from that trip.
From both of that, you've stayed in contact with.
Yeah.
Have you been on long time bicycle trips before, so you kind of knew what you were doing?
Yeah, I've done trips across the U.S. Well, one long trip across the U.S., a couple times on the California coast, trip across Colorado, so that kind of thing. I haven't done much traveling outside of the U.S. until this trip.
But in terms of just a man on his bike going down the road, you have lots of experience of just being on the road.
I've done it a few times, yeah.
Okay. When you were starting to make this a reality, what were people's reactions to you're telling them, I'm going to make this 4,000-mile trek through Europe and Africa?
Most people just like, I suppose they weren't too surprised.
Knowing you.
Knowing me. Yeah, like, okay, another bike trip. I guess there's some concern about, going across the Sahara.
I want to come back to that
Okay.
trip across the Sahara, but
Okay.
first, how much stuff did you take with you, and did you had to ship everything to England? How did that work?
Yeah, well, this is my bike. I had it in a couple cardboard boxes with my camping gear, sleeping bags, clothes, tools, various other things. I had a laptop. I had extra stuff
really?
a little laptop, and stuff like that. I had it all in 2 cardboard boxes I took on the plane with me. A total of about 100 pounds worth of stuff.
And the
And
bike
then,
itself weighs how much?
Probably about 40 pounds.
So you have
Something
the
like
bike and 60 pounds of supplies or equipment, basically equipment to
Yeah,
take with you.
yeah. It's kind of heavy.
So did you have bags on the front and the back?
I did.
Like saddle bags
I
kind of
did.
things?
Front, back. I had a little bag here for carrying extra water. I had a little bag up here for camera and stuff like that.
And
map.
did you take spare tires and spare inner tubes? And
I had a couple spare inner tubes, a spare tire, spare spokes, spare chain. I didn't need any of it.
You didn't?
No.
But you know about bicycle maintenance, so you could do all those things.
Yeah.
And you really didn't have a flat tire. That's really
I had no flat tires.
amazing.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
it's kind of crazy.
Once you got to England with your bike and 60 pounds of equipment, did you have to get something more, or were you just ready to go when you got there?
I was pretty much ready to go. I have a friend in London. I stayed at his flat and put my bike back together, and it was pretty much ready to go.
Did you have to buy food? And
I did. It kind of varied as I went along. In France and England, I tended to buy at little restaurants along the way. As I got further south, I tended to buy food to take with me and camp and cook and stuff like that.
so you went through France and you went through Spain.
Right,
So they speak French and Spanish.
right.
And then you went to Morocco. Do they speak French in Morocco?
There's enough French that I could get by. My French is not very good, but I can kind of stammer.
And you know a little Spanish?
I don't know any Spanish.
No Spanish.
Spain was difficult for me.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Did you have a
Although-
book, a little phrase book or something?
Yeah, I got a little.
Okay.
little
How did you, obviously you have to go through the Mediterranean or the Straits of Gibraltar to get,
Mhm.
how do you get
Mhm.
from Spain to Morocco?
In right at the southern edge of Spain, you can take a ferry across the strait there to Tangier, Morocco.
Mm.
It's probably less than 20 miles. You can see the other side. And yeah,
So you
Takes
took
about an hour.
a boat,
Yep.
basically.
yeah. And I did the same from England to France.
You said you had a computer. So
I
what did you use the computer for?
I used the computer I have a little blog. I used that for writing blog entries.
Like an internet blog where people
Yeah.
could follow along
Yeah.
with where you were?
Yeah, and post pictures and stuff.
Okay.
And I had a little smartphone which I took along, and I actually have a charger on the bike. I could
Ooh.
charge my phone while I was riding, so that's
Excellent.
nice. So this was in December and January, and leaving England and riding through France was fine, but I'd forgotten that Spain is at elevation and was pretty cold. And after that, I felt like I wanted to stick to the coast and where it was warmer.
Warmer, yeah. Yeah, good.
Rather
And it's
than-
probably more level also.
Yeah,
A little
yeah,
bit.
yeah.
Is there more on your blog than just this trip? Or is it mainly
not much.
about-
It's mainly about the trip. I need to keep it up to date more.
Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you can look at Steve's blog and see his route and see the pictures he took, and you can also see the comments that he made along the way. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah, and you can comment on my comments.
And we can comment on your comments.
You can do that.
Okay. What was the most difficult thing that you went through?
Well, a lot of people think that, it's the physical exertion is probably difficult, but that's not really the case. You get used to that within a day or two or three. What really gets difficult is cycling on your own because you're moving every day and you don't have people to talk to, especially when you're in a country where you don't know the language well. So after about 2 months, I was starting to feel a little burnt out, and but I took some time, hung out in Morocco for a couple weeks, and it worked out pretty well.
That solitary experience is one that has snuck up on a lot of people, because
Yeah.
I know people who were making long distance sailing trips, and suddenly they thought it was all going to be fun and exciting, but then they get into this long period of time where they're having to deal with loneliness, and
Right.
it was unexpected.
Right.
So when you went to Morocco, what did you do to kind of rejuvenate yourself?
Well, the main thing for me is just to slow down, rather than trying to press on every day and get more miles. It's like I was in Tangier. I just decided to stay there for 5 or 6 days. I did the same in Rabat and Casablanca.
Oh,
Yep, and another little town, Essaouira. I spent like 5 days there, and it was really nice just to be off the bike for a while, wander around town, be able to see the same people more than one day at a time.
did you find that part of your journey was a spiritual journey as well as the physical trek you made?
It wasn't overtly a spiritual journey. I guess I was interested in the environmental aspect, the landscape and the ecology along the way, and also the cultural aspects, just experiencing such a wide range of cultures between Western Europe and North Africa and West Africa.
And you also went through Basque Country in northern Spain.
I did, which is a beautiful area again, and really interesting.
And you saw sheep and all kinds, lots of sheep.
I saw sheep and cows and, eventually camels and you name it.
You were saying you saw camels that were just grazing in the desert.
Yeah. I think they just wander around like cattle do in the western U.S. They just kind of graze, and someone eventually probably tracks them down. I don't think they're wild, but it was interesting. You'd be biking along through the desert, and there'd be camels just hanging out.
We're now going to show a video piece made by David Sullenberger and Kay Geyer that talks about the 3,000 Miles for Peace, a program being introduced by Honor Peace to honor the memory of Paul Ziegler, a Church of the Brethren college student who died in a bicycle automobile accident September 2012.
All those who have come before, gone before their time, we are here because of you. Yes, we stand here thanks to you. We stand here thanks to you.
Paul's idea was to ride across the U.S. As he said, I think when I ride across the U.S., I'd like to get sponsors and maybe pick up other riders along the way and donate the money towards world peace.
Inspired by Paul's vision, On Earth Peace is asking people all across the country to organize bike rides, organize walks, that all of us together will go 3,000 miles to fulfill his dream and to raise money and awareness for On Earth Peace.
Fulfilling Paul's vision.
Fulfilling a vision of peace.
We will journey 3,000 miles. 3,000 miles for peace.
Walking. Biking.
By ourselves, with our friends, on our campuses, and in our communities.
Organizing those around us.
To walk.
To ride. To gain pledges of support for On Earth Peace.
Adding our mileage to those around the country.
Whether it's 1 mile or 100.
Because it's a rough world for kids to grow up in, and we need to lend a hand.
Because it is a violent world, and we need to teach peace.
And build peace.
And be peace.
You might do it for the sake of people you know, or for the sake of people you never meet.
You might do it in honor of Paul, or just to be your own best self.
You might do it to change the world.
And you might.
3,000 Miles for Peace is also a fundraiser. I'm planning to walk from northern Indiana to eastern Pennsylvania, about 650 miles, and I'll be inviting people to sponsor my walk. I hope you'll also be looking for people to sponsor a walk or bike ride that you might do to raise funds for peacemaking.
On Earth Peace has a lot of components of teaching people how to get along and work things out peacefully, and that would mean a lot to Paul.
On Earth Peace will use these funds raised for the things that Paul believed in that make for peace. For instance, a young person in the inner city will learn how to deal with violence in their lives in a constructive and effective way. A congregation facing conflict in its midst will see how to do that faithfully and successfully. And a neighborhood that faces issues of violence threatening the community will have help as they figure out how to roll back violence in their midst.
On Earth Peace is one good way to show people how they can come to peace. It's an action, not just a word that we say. And so kind of makes sense that he was planning on doing a bike ride for peace to bring awareness instead of just talking about it.
So grab your boots made for walking.
Your shoes made for pedaling.
And hit the road, March through May 2013.
As a biker,
a walker,
an organizer, a supporter.
Become a part of the movement.
3,000 miles for peace.
3,000 miles for peace.
3,000 miles for peace.
We're in the studio with Steve Kayford, who recently took a 4,000-mile bicycle journey from London, England to St. Louis, Senegal. See, one of the questions that people ask is was it dangerous, and where did you sleep at night?
Right. It wasn't very dangerous, actually. I guess the main thing is just dealing with traffic like you would get anywhere. There's a fair number of people who drive RVs down to Morocco from Western Europe to go surfing, actually. And so you have to watch for RVs on the roads, that kind of thing.
So there, as well as here, your biggest danger is cars and trucks and RVs.
I think so, yeah. The thing that I was worried about initially was there were some reports of kidnappings several years ago in Mauritania. And as a result of that, when I was traveling with the other cyclists, when we were in Mauritania, we were required to always stop and camp at a police checkpoint.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Who requires? The government requires that?
The police would.
Oh.
So we would be riding along, we'd get to a police checkpoint, and if it was late enough in the day, they would say, no, you can't keep going, you have to camp here.
So they're actually looking out for your interest and
yeah.
and offered that protection.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
wonderful.
And actually, a couple times they gave us, fried fish, and
Wow.
it was great. And we got to taste fresh camel milk that way.
Fresh camel milk?
Yeah.
What is fresh camel milk? Does it taste significantly different than cow's or goat's milk? Or?
It does a little. I'd have a hard time describing it.
Is it more pungent or stronger tasting or sweet? Or?
It was a little sweet, kind of nutty, seemed to me.
Oh, really?
And it was warm, straight out of the camel.
Oh, wonderful. Well, most of us have heard about England, France, Spain, and Morocco, and perhaps Casablanca because of the movie. But the next two countries, I don't know anything about. And can you just tell us a little bit about those countries,
right?
So that people will kind of get an idea of what it's like.
Right. Well, if you keep going south from Morocco, depending on who you ask, you'll go through Western Sahara, which some people consider that a separate country. Morocco considers it part of Morocco. So there's no border, there's no customs or anything like that along the way.
Do they have their own government?
No,
Not
it's
really.
like a regional government. And that's really desert. Yeah, there's not a whole
Really
lot.
desert.
Really desert.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot out there. And then from there you get into Mauritania, and more desert. A lot of wind, really interesting culture.
Is it French speaking also?
There's some French. It was at one point a French colony. Primarily they speak a type of a dialect of Arabic, but I don't know any Arabic, unfortunately. Yeah, and then south of Mauritania is Senegal.
And what is Senegal like?
It's much more a West African nation. Feels much more sub-Saharan rather than North African like Mauritania and Morocco.
So it has their civilization, and it's
Well,
not so remote, and it's actually there's people and cities and buses and cars and.
Yeah, well, actually, even in Mauritania, there's a couple cities that we went through. Yeah, a couple big cities, and then miles and miles and miles of nothing in between them.
Well, when you say miles and miles and miles, what is it? I mean, you're riding through the desert, and are you on a paved road?
Yeah.
And
yeah,
so
it's
then,
mostly
how long between cities or rest stops or oases or watering holes?
Well, probably the longest was about 3 days without anything. That would be southern Western Sahara, just getting into northern Mauritania.
And how many? So when you say 2 or 3 days or 3 days, how many miles a day were you riding?
At that point, probably 80 to 90 miles a day.
80 miles, 90 miles a day.
Yeah.
So it was like 270 miles between places.
Something like that.
Where people lived.
Yeah.
That's like
one
one end of Oregon to the other.
With maybe, I think there was maybe a gas station in the middle somewhere there.
Oh my goodness.
Or two.
And so you knew this was coming, so you were prepared
right.
with food and water for 3 days.
Yes.
And was it hot? Was the desert hot?
It was surprisingly pleasant, actually. Probably in the 70s Fahrenheit.
In the days?
During
Daytime?
the day, getting up to the 70s.
And nighttime?
Maybe in the 40s or 50s.
So a little chilly, but still
Chilly.
not too bad.
Yeah, it was great.
And that, I would imagine that was a lonely stretch too. Unless, did you see other bicyclists?
I did, actually. In southern Morocco, I ran into 2 other cyclists who were doing the same route. And we decided we would ride together.
So you had some company through the desert.
Yeah. So
Well,
that was nice.
Now Senegal is a Muslim country.
Yeah.
Primarily Muslim, and you spent several weeks or a couple months in Senegal after
I did.
making the trek.
Yep.
What was it like that? Did you have any encounters with the Muslim people? Were they different,
yeah.
or did they treat you well, or Were they surprised an American was in their country?
I wouldn't say they were surprised. They don't get a whole lot of Americans. They get quite a few French and Europeans. But I was treated really well the whole way along.
So there wasn't any anti-American sentiment that was directed at you?
Never had any of that feeling. And I really enjoy traveling in Muslim countries. I really enjoy hearing the Islamic call to prayer, 5 times a day. I think it's great. With one of the other cyclists, we actually were invited to sleep in a little village mosque one night.
I was going to ask you if you got to visit a mosque.
Yeah.
So you actually were invited to sleep in the mosque?
Yeah, in a little room off to the side, part of the mosque.
You did it? Did you do it?
Yeah. Yeah, and it was great.
I'm surprised and intrigued by your saying that you like the Muslim call to prayer, because I've experienced that myself, and we don't have anything in this country that even compares to that. Where at specific times of the day, there's a general loudspeaker,
right, with
somebody chanting.
Yeah.
And I couldn't understand what they were saying, but I knew that's what it was. And the first one is like 5 o'clock in the morning or something, pretty early.
It can be a little jarring.
I actually have decided, I think praying 3, 4, 5 times a day is a good thing, because it keeps you close to God.
Right.
And you're remembering to be grateful and appreciative of the things throughout the day, and it's not something that just gets set aside and you forget it, because you're being regularly reminded that there's a Creator and we're His people. Thank you for being with us on Brethren Voices.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
It's a fascinating story and a wonderful trip, and thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you.
This is Brent Carlson with Steve Kayford for Brethren Voices. Peace.
All those who tread the path he trod, all those who tread the path he trod, all those who tread the path he trod shall be called the friends of God. May His peace begin with me. Oh, the Jesus way is the way of peace. Oh, the Jesus way is the way of peace. Oh, the Jesus way is the way of peace. When He is King, all wars will cease. May His peace begin with me.